Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kind for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Anyhow, folks, how are you all doing? Welcome aboard. E2247 is in the house, and the one and only Bridge MCP is in the house. She says, hot here and well, Bruce, but the humidity and dew point not like water out there. You know, the good thing about that kind of heat in New York is you spray a mist on you and you kind of feel cool. Here in Texas, not so much. Eric Hayes is in the house. Welcome, Eric Hayes. We also have Bruce Pollard. Says, good day, y'all. Try it. Temperature is 102 in the shade. Yes, I know. My air conditioner is running overtime. Let's see what else we got. Egberto, how long is Andrew Schmookler's interview today? 34 minutes. I am trying to get them cut down going forward to about 25 minutes. I develop a good skill in doing that with Andy. You know, with Andy, it's kind of difficult. Anyhow, we also have, let's see, who else is in the house that I'm missing? Michael Rudden says he will be away for today, but we have E2247 and more coming in. Let me read the good long one from Bridge MCP. Let me prepare myself for that reading. It says, Hunter Biden listened to his lawyer. Trump should have done the same. Hunter is expected to plead guilty to 2 federal misdemeanor counts of failing to pay his taxes. Biden also faces a separate felony gun possession charge, but that will likely be dismissed. As a rule, it's generally but not to focus too much attention on the family members of politicians. If elected officials' kids enter the political arena, it's generally best not to focus, or rather, serving in positions of public power or influence. For example, the standards change, but in general, the fact that someone is related to a politician does not mean he or she necessarily deserves extra scrutiny. With Hunter Biden, this rule has largely been thrown out of the window. President Joe Biden's son has never worked in the White House, does not appear to have any influence in any area of public policy, and has never sought public office. He's nevertheless been the subject of intense Republican for several years. Whether one sees this news as worthy of national attention or not, it certainly is historic. This is the first time in American history that the child of a sitting president has been prosecuted by the Justice Department. In fact, in the abstract, the circumstances are remarkable and to a degree, encouraging. In the United States, we take the rule of law so seriously that Justice Department officials felt comfortable prosecuting a sitting president's kid without fear of retribution and without interference from the White House. Instead, let's also not lose sight of the fact that the prosecutor in this case was appointed not by Democratic incumbent, but by Donald Trump. Joe Biden kept David Weiss, the U.S. attorney in Delaware, in his position so that he could continue the investigation into his son. It's a reminder as to how the system should work. That said, Republicans apparently don't quite see it that way. Trump said last fall that the federal prosecutor in this case has been told to do nothing. There were no such directives. This former president just made this up. And this morning, the Republican pointed to Hunter Biden's prosecution as proof of corruption in a federal enforcement reality notwithstanding. Kevin McCarthy claimed this morning that the Hunter Biden case is evidence of a two-tier system. That's true, but not in the way the GOP leader meant it. There's apparently one tier for criminal suspects who cooperate with prosecutors and listen to sensible defense attorneys, and another for criminal suspects who don't. And it's even deeper than that. Donald Trump has been a criminal for decades. Donald Trump and Trump have been ripping people off, screwing people for a long time, and he hasn't paid the piper. And now he may pay the piper, and the people are about to lose their minds. All right, who else is there? Carl Cox says, the progressive Cox is here. Welcome, Carl Cox. Eric Hayes says, Andy is long-winded. No, but he's good, though. I like Andy. Lee Grant, hey, y'all. How you doing, Lee? Let's see. Factual authority, institutions, price, facts over feeling, evidence over emotions, observations over options, conservatives favor feelings, emotions, etc. One of the reasons I like sometimes the long ones is it gives, look, I do 10 of these every week. Every now and then one long-winded person to give me a little break. I think it's okay. Don't you guys think? Tell me if you like that. You know, what can I say? All right. What else have we got? Eric Hunter, the gun and drug and hooker and name peddling thug. If you want to call him that, good for you. Bruce Pollard said, good show this morning. Remember the CNN financial guys 10 years ago telling me to save my dollars, have the kid take college loans. Imagine that. That's what they did, didn't they? Eric Hayes says, breach MCP, total BS rule. Law doesn't apply equally. It doesn't apply equally, but not the way you think. What else we got here? Carl Cox says, Hunter Biden is a piece of crap. No doubt. However, Eric Hayes loves defense conservative crooks like Trump. That's a good observation, Carl Cox. And Eric, you should take that with it. You should really listen to what Carl Cox just said, because look at how you define Hunter. And Hunter hasn't done 10%. He's not a good guy, but he hasn't done 10% as bad as did Donald Trump. Okay, guys, we can keep chatting in the chat room as we listen to our good friend Andrew Schmookler. Okay. We'll continue chatting as we listen to Smookler. There we go, and we start at this minute right now. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. We continue with our series, A Better Human Story by the one and only Dr. Andrew Schmookler, who is a prize-winning author, former Democratic candidate for Congress in Virginia's very rich Shenandoah Valley, former talk show radio host, summa cum laude graduate of Harvard University, PhD awarded with distinction in a program specifically created to accommodate his original theory explaining how civilization has developed, and a frequent columnist in newspapers around the entire United States. Welcome once again, Andrew Schmookler. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing okay.
Well, you know, last time we left, we had a word that I used called the shallowness of where America is, of who we've become.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to expand on that, because I think if we take a look at where society is today, how politicians are able to accomplish what they do, how politicians are able to do what they do, a lot of it has, in my opinion, to be that we have become and are becoming a more shallow nation. And to which you say?
Well, the question of what kind of consciousness has developed in America is huge. And I would like to share my own little story. When you said shallowness of culture, I had a lot of things that came to my mind because of what my life has brought me. But so I'll explain a little story about what led me to ask, well, what the hell is going on? Because the world didn't act like I believed it would act. So here's the story. A lot of this is things that our regular listeners will already recognize, but where it comes from is I had an experience in 1970 which showed me something very, very important, and I think kind of irrefutable about the story of our species. In particular, it offered an explanation of why human history has been the way it has and why the world is as screwed up as it is. I think I've delivered on our conversations a couple of statements, which I'll just quickly rehearse, which says, any creature anywhere on any planet in this cosmos that takes a step onto the path of civilization will be condemned to embark upon a destructive social evolutionary process like the one that has beset human civilization for over the millennia. I think I can prove that. And I likewise believe that my argument, which I've been working on it for a long time, and it holds water. But anyway, the ugliness we see in human history is not human nature writ large. Now, I think that if people recognized those truths, it would have a transformative effect. When I saw that on a particular day in 1970, it just changed the whole course of my life. It blew me away. I mean, it shook me to my bones. I wept.
It shook you to your bones that humanity is better than the humanity you thought it was. In other words, most people are good people.
Well, what shook me to the bones was a combination of, I saw what had happened to our species and nobody else had ever seen this thing, which is really important. And it answering the question I've been wrestling with for several years at that point, which is why is the world so destructive? 1968 took me to a new place. But the other thing is, I didn't know up that point, I didn't know what to do with my life. I had always been goal directed, but what sense does it make to fit into a world that's out of joint? Well, I got an assignment on that day, and I worked on it. I got my doctorate. I wrote a 1,600-page dissertation. I got a Ford Foundation grant to turn that big thing into something that could get published. I got it published in 1984 by the University of California Press, who treated it like a big deal. The New York Times gave it a full page. It was a big deal, and I had always envisioned, if I could only get this thing out into the culture as I envisioned the culture to be, it would blow other people away too. It would change things. It would have an impact. That's why it was worthwhile to sacrifice a whole lot to get that written. So it gets out there. According to the world that I thought I lived in, something that is compellingly argued, that has big implications if it were true, would challenge the thinking world to either refute it so you didn't have to worry about what it was saying, or accept it, which means you move toward what's been shown to be true, or you keep struggling with it. But the world didn't do any of those things.
No, of course not.
Well, you say, of course not. I thought that I had fulfilled my promise when I got the book out there so well. Esquire magazine put it out there. Oh, it was great to be out of the wilderness and no longer quite the nobody. And, it was, and I thought that it was going to happen. People were getting exposed to it. It was no longer this thing that I had failed to get out into the world yet. But then they don't refute it. They don't accept it. They don't struggle with it. And when I saw that it had gotten out there, but then just been ignored,
that's the word. That's the word, ignored. And there's a lot of, when do you ignore it? A shallowness creates ignorance, but continue.
Okay. Well, so I've had, what is it? So like by the early 90s, I recognized that this thing had made its little splash and then disappeared into the depths. Yeah, and so I've had a long time to ask myself, well, why is that? What is that? Well, I can see how I got to my beliefs. I grew up with a father who was always had intellectual integrity. I mean, I thought that the thinking world would respond the way my father would. But I also think that there was a difference. I looked around, I've been aspiring to be, I'd like people to take on what I've put together, the way people, when I was growing up, took on people like Karl Marx with his systematic way of understanding human history, and Freud, who was the guy that I, as a late teenager, I got to know his thinking, and it was an important part of my thinking. I wanted to get out there, but and it wasn't happening. And then I noticed it wasn't as though other people's ideas, about big ideas, big picture ideas about how to understand the human world, were getting adopted, and mine wasn't making the grade somehow. Nobody, Freud and Marx had fallen out of favor. They were no longer they no longer had followings in the world, except very fringe in both cases. But there wasn't anybody else. And that's what got me thinking about when you said the shallowness of culture. I've been entertaining the idea, which seems to be true, that one of the ways in which our culture is shallow is we don't seek a big picture way of grasping the whole ball game, the human drama. Like when I talk about the crisis in America, it's always part of a whole human drama that's been unfolding since the beginnings of civilization. I draw the lines. I've been cultivating this picture. It's all part of the same thing. And it's part of helping us see what the nature of the battle is and seeing what the nature of the battlefield is. And I think it's really important that we don't just see the news of the day, but we see the big picture. And yet, I mean, there are people who are thinkers in our time. I could list a few, but they're not at the magnitude of what Freud or Marx did. They're not trying to show a whole big vista, and whether accurately or inaccurately, what both of those guys declared showed something that you could apply to the human story in general, whether it's class conflict in the case of Marx or the role of the unconscious in the case of Freud, interpreting Greek myths and such.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because I think you're hitting on something that sometimes I wonder, it's right in front of all of us and it's not seen, right? You mentioned about the provocative and probably fact-based nature of, let's say, Freud and Marx and others. And what did we want to occur to those? We wanted those to fall out of favor. We wanted to be able to ignore those things, because
why would we? I mean, why wouldn't we want to have a? I mean, I don't buy either of those pictures.
You buy your own. You buy your own. And why do you buy your own? Because it makes sense. Okay. To you, it makes sense. To me, it makes sense.
But why wouldn't people want the world to make sense?
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. If we start thinking not just for the now, if we start having critical thoughts, what makes this happen? What allows this to happen? How does humanity behave instinctively in a natural? It creates a problem from something you speak about all of the times, and that is the gangster. There are a lot more of us than there are the gangsters.
Oh, okay, so you're saying, I think what you're saying is that the gangster force.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about it as a force, not the. But anyway,
right, got it.
That it has an interest,
right,
in keeping us fragmented in our thinking.
Yes.
So we can't see the force that we need to fight and overcome.
Exactly. And it's obvious. Again, let's forget about your personal ideology. But Karl Marx had a vision. if Sigmund Freud had a vision, you have a vision, and you believe if people were to see the logic behind what you are doing, it'll create, even if they don't necessarily agree, it'll cause them to think critically. And in the process of thinking critically, just what may they have come up with?
But there's a piece needing to be put in here.
Go ahead.
You and I have agreed that that our inability to see the big picture serves, I will say, the force of brokenness.
Yes.
Okay. That doesn't by itself explain why it is that the thinking world would be disabled or reoriented. I mean,
it does.
Let's say in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, America, the force of brokenness was alive in the world. They always had an interest in keeping people from seeing certain things.
Right.
But nonetheless, people were looking for something that would explain why the world was the way it was, whether it be civilization and its discontents as a way of understanding it from Freud, or the class conflict from feudal to capitalist to proletarian state or whatever. People had an appetite for it. How did it come to be? I mean, are we to say that that the force of brokenness was able to make people unable or uninterested? It's more meaningful.
I think
when you see the big picture.
I think it's a process. I think it was a marginally slow process. You know, I saw last night as I was blogging at about 1 or 2 in the morning. I was watching. You ever heard of a woman's? Her name is Elizabeth Holmes. She was. Oh
yeah, she's been convicted of fraud.
Right. Okay. And you watch Elizabeth Holmes' story, and you talk about learned people, very smart people, both politically and scientifically. The people scientifically knew that what she was talking about really sounded like junk. The people in that had power were concerned about if that junk is true. You just watch how the machination went that this fraud from a girl who started at 19 years old with the fraud, all the way up to her age now, which is 39. I looked at that, and believe it or not, I thought about you and brokenness and the gangster.
Are you saying
her as the gangster? Yeah.
Are you saying that the minds of the people whom she conned manifested some inabilities that are relevant to this conversation?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I think you hit it on the nail. I think you nailed it, because what happens is the way our minds work. Look, it doesn't matter that you're a scholar. You happen to be a scholar who are strong-minded. There are not many scholars that are strong-minded. We have that they'll come out and they'll tell their theories, but if one fights back too hard, they don't lose belief in their theory, but they go ahead and they keep it to themselves.
Can I take this conversation back to me?
Absolutely.
Okay. So here I am. I just turned 77 this week.
Happy birthday. Belated.
I probably have reached at least the halfway point.
There you go.
So I happen to believe my life would be simpler if I didn't. That what I've put together, if it did occupy some significant space in how people in the world think about the human story and the challenges we face, I happen to think it would have a beneficial effect. I think that we would be, and a beneficial effect, I mean, make it improve the likelihood that human civilization will survive the next couple centuries, as opposed to culminating in some kind of self-inflicted catastrophe?
Well, I would say that it's doing that already. I mean, the fact that, I found you knew about you.
So to take it back to the shallowness of the culture, I'm about to take my show on the road in a couple of new ways. And one of them is putting out a series on daily costs, where I appear regularly as a reasonably well-respected political commentator talking about the immediate situation.
And by the way, let me interrupt, folks. He put an article out there at Daily Coast that simply went viral. I kind of got some notifications on it, and I said, well, guys, I got him first. You guys just are getting the leftovers of what brother Smookler has to say.
It's the big picture that's my life's mission. I mean, I want to do whatever I can to help American democracy survive. And I've worked on that pretty full time since I saw what we were up against in 2004.
Right.
So that's sort of a...
Hey, Andy, your camera kind of bumped. Yeah, I want to see your picture. Yeah, there you go. That's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When you come too close, the head gets chopped. There you go.
Yeah, that's a metaphor for the whole thing, I guess. But so we're talking about, it could have a beneficial effect. I just, whether anybody else believes it or not, is that belief.
No, I'm other people. Okay. I'm not you.
Okay.
And I'm telling you that in as much as there is for certain things that I disagree with you on, I think your message is so powerful. First of all, I just got glued to a better human story, because those people who believe in our humanity, who believe we're better than what we look like, I think those are the people that we should be concurrently promoting. Go ahead, sir.
Well, it's interesting. You should focus on that. I'm going to have to think about that. That might be a direction I should take some things. But if the culture is shallow in the ways that you're talking about, that's one obstacle. And I'm about to put this stuff, the best of my ability. I'm working on it in several different ways. Presenting the big picture on daily costs, where people are there because they're interested in the battles of this moment, which I'm interested in too. So I write about those. But I'm now wanting to show the thing that's my life's mission to show, which is the big picture, the better human story, which even helps us understand and fight the current battle better than we've been doing. So it doesn't mean, let's stop paying attention to this fascistic force that's taken over the Republican Party. Let's understand what it is and where it came from and what its components are and the force of evil that's involved here, that's expressing itself here. That's a function of the forces that we unleashed as soon as we took on the path of civilization, and it was inevitable that we would. I want people to see that that's where our species story has been, and it means we're better creatures than we should have been. It means that we can see more clearly the nature of the challenge we face in saving American democracy and in preventing civilization from destroying itself. It's all part of one big picture, and we can fight and win better if we see it. That's where I'm coming from. How do I get that across to the world as you see it as so shallow?
Well, I tell you something. I have to tell it to you in a short story. And by the way, we're going over today because the conversation is so sweet. Okay, but this is what I actually told. I was on a board of a particular organization where I did a lot of blogging and I wrote a whole lot of notes. And in that note, I would have these headlines that would piss the leaders, the other leaders off. And we'll go into meetings and they'll Egberto, why are you saying it that way? Or why are you doing that? And I said, to get eyeballs. And he said, but that's not what we're all about. To get eyeballs, you're messing with the message. And I said, and then the other part they said is, but you have a title like that, and when you read the story, it is so it's nothing like the title, and it tells you so much. And I'm like, it is like the title. It just got their attention to go ahead and be willing to digest what was given. And that is the magic. You asked, how do we get a shallow people to start listening to us? You go meet them. In other words, you're not shallow. And if you stay in your lane, you are only going to meet people in your lane, people with your level of intellect, people with your level of unshallowness. To be able to get to those others, you have to meet them where they are. And that is the most difficult part of it all.
I want to start with, I write these things up, and I'm writing a 20-minute sermon that I'll probably be going around the country and giving to like Unitarian churches. Mm-hmm. I used to do that kind of thing in the 80s and the 90s anyway, but I haven't done it since I lived in New Mexico. And mm-hmm. But suddenly I have something to say, which is kind of the message. Is the present title of the thing is, let me get up there. Well, basically, it's got to do with how important it is to see the humans, how the evolutionary perspective gives us a better human story. That's.
I love that. You see, I love that. I think every time, there are times that you keep telling somebody how bad they are or how bad X, Y, Z, and they immediately live up to their expectation. I'll tell you another little quick story with my kid, who is a Black Latina, of course, like her daddy. She went to a school, and there was a time where, she took all AP courses, and they were encouraging her not to take these courses. And what I tried to illustrate to other parents, because other parents did follow their lead, and, they'll come and, like, Berta, my daughter wanted to go into AP, and they suggested that she goes to the regular, standard program. What happens too often in society is either we live up or we live down to people's expectations, or we allow other people to allow us to live down to the expectations they have of us.
Funny that you should talk about expectations, because what I say about why it's important to understand that the ugliness we see in human history isn't human nature writ large. Right. I think that people, if they think for a minute, they'll recognize that if that could be proved, that would have a big effect on how we see ourselves.
Interestingly, Dr. Smookler, let me tell you the reason I adapted the methodology that I adapt with my right-wing brothers and sisters, right? Because if I go into a Starbucks without talking about, hey, I'm your pinko liberal, I'm your pinko progressive, I can sit down and talk to somebody about their kid, about their wife, about the illnesses that they have and all these things. And it turns out like, wow, this guy's a nice guy. Then I say, hey, I'm a liberal. I said, you're what? You've got horns, So I've learned I've proven what you've preached for quite some time now.
Let me say something about my limitations, because I'm willing to claim what I've done with my strong suit.
Right.
I know what I've done, but I feel a couple of limitations right now, and I'm grateful to you because I think you're helping me overcome them by your role in the conversations. One is, I'm a very march to your own drummer kind of a guy. Mm-hmm. And my brother, for example, who's a therapist, he's able to form himself in a whole variety of ways to be with a whole variety of people. I'm more of the cast in a particular mold,
right,
kind of a guy. And so I can listen to people and understand people empathetically, but I don't meet people on their territory. I meet them on mine. And another thing which limits me is that I'm a product of a different era.
True.
I'm watching a movie called that I got on my DVR called Friends with Benefits.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sweet movie, but it's also kind of shocking. You know, I feel like, am I watching this? Am I watching You've Got Mail, or am I watching porn? And I realize that there's a generation out there watching this movie that's not having the problem I have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you know, the old fogey aspect of things, but I don't really, you know, I don't feel like that. You know, I'm intellectually trained,
right,
and by a brilliant father and the best education you can get in America, and was always highly motivated. I made of myself everything that I could, and what it is a holistic social visionary thinker coming out of the Jewish tradition in some sense.
Andy, let me tell you something, and I say this with a lot of respect. And I say that, you know, I love you, I like you, all that good stuff.
Did I do something bad just now?
No, you did not. You didn't at all. But what I'm saying is you are just a creature of who you are. Okay.
Yeah, and I see the limits.
Let me finish. Let me get the shocking part that I want to tell you.
Yeah,
you are a creature of who you are. You happen to be this white guy who has always have, you know, who never had to compromise. If you take a listen to what you're saying, which I'm saying there's nothing wrong with that, and I would like to be this.
I want people to know that I had to compromise in that I never made a living.
I know, but what I'm trying to say, what I'm really trying to say here is more so than most. And you in our conversation, that is very evident, right? You don't have to, you want people to play on your field and all of that, and that's not a bad thing. Let me get what I'm trying to say, because this is not a critique. This is a reality. This is not a critique at all. This is just how things have evolved in this country for the sake of people. Now, in this conversation that we have, right, we are able to expand the horizons of all kinds of folks that are listening to us. Because in the areas where, because of history, you are not used to, let's say, doing certain kinds of compromising or whatever, others are. And in that machination of people with these different points of view, etc., your message as well gets through. And that's why, I know who you are when I said, hey, let's do this series. And I really enjoy them because, again, there is so much to learn, and there's so much that someone like you adds to this entire discussion. And I love the title, A Better Human Story.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that you said earlier had to do with being better creatures than we thought ourselves to be. You know, when I first wrote The Parable of Tribes, I emphasized how it was, in a sense, humbling news, that we have not been the masters of our own destiny, that we have been the victims of forces that we unwittingly unleashed. So I announced it as humbling news, building off of what Freud said. You know, Copernicus showed us that we weren't at the center of the universe. Darwin showed us that we weren't a special creation. And now, says Freud, I show us that we're not masters in our own consciousness. And then I said, and now I show the bad news, the humbling news, that the course that we've taken in civilization has not been an expression of us and of our choices. It was something we fell into that we couldn't avoid.
And, you know, go finish your thought. I'm sorry.
So Then in recent years, when I came up with a better human story, I came up with this thought, which I think, which you're directing me back to also, which is that bad news in a way that we're, this thing's out of control. The human civilization is and always has been out of control. I think that should be written up as a theme in its own. But
don't forget to title it.
Where was I there?
Well, let me tell you where you are, because we are way over time. And what I want people to do is come back for what we are going to talk about, because Andy ended today's conversation in a very important spot in A Better Human Story.
Let me just finish that thought, because you'll like it.
Okay, go ahead.
That I realized that I should talk about the good news there, that we have thought ourselves to be as ugly a species as you would get the impression we were if you watched all the ancient civilizations emerge out of hunting-gathering societies to arrive at the tyrannies and empire building and slavery that we see throughout wherever it showed up. Imagine that if what the good news of saying that's not who we are. It didn't matter what our nature was. Any creature would have become the same ugly thing.
Andy Bard, Dr. Andy Bard Schmookler. We will continue this conversation about who we really are. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Well, I'm grateful to you, Egberto.
All right, folks. I know it's kind of long. It went overdue. I'm going to try to keep the series that I'm doing with Schmookler to about 25 minutes. We get off into talking and I kind of lose time. And I really, processing it would have been kind of choppy in this one. I could have done it, but I didn't. Anyhow, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I have another video to show you guys, but I'll do that a little bit later. I love what was going on in the chat. Eric Hayes thought that Smookler was a bit narcissistic. I hope you saw how I handled that. You're correct that when somebody says I will only play on my field, that requires some sort of response. I am willing not to just play on my field. I'm willing to play on other fields. If we really want to make change, if we really want other people to listen to us, whether you're on the left or the right, you have to be willing to go on their fields. And I think over the years, that is the one thing that I've learned. And that is going into Tea Party domains, well, my wife didn't allow me to go into the Patriots domain the last time I got invited. And she said there's no way that I was going to be heading out there with the militia. Absolutely not, she said. It was one that we had arranged in Waco, but she said no, so I couldn't go. But I think people have to feel some sort of familiarity with you. In other words, somehow feel that you're a part of something that you can link in commonality. Eric said, oh, you gave me a compliment, Eric. I'm impressed. You said, you're pretty fair, Egberto. I will give you that to you, but sometimes can't me off the rails. Now you want to say I'm off the rails sometime. Okay, I'll take it. All right, let's see what else we have here. E2247 says, these all at-scale disinformation campaigns are the active measures that have been used to start democracies, to blast democracies the past 100 years since the 1920s. They will try. It is up to us to prevent it from happening, brother E2247. What else did I have? Bridge, I know. After 20 minutes. That's why I said I'm going to try to get it to 25 minutes, Bridge. I'll try to get it to 25 minutes. I'm going to try to put that clock there and tell Smookler, hey, Bridge wants you to hurry up. Bridge wants you to hurry up. So come on, get to the point, brother Smookler. Bridge wants you to hurry up. because he has a lot to say. He has a lot of good things to say. All right, what else have I got here? Anything else people want me to say before I jump to the short other video? Lee Grant had said something I wanted to mention, but I can't find it. Eric Hayes says, no, that's not what I want to read. I want to read one from, anyway, Lee Grant, if there's something you want me to repeat, put it in again because I forgot it. Anyway, I wanted you guys to see this montage because finally it seems that more Republicans are coming up against Donald Trump as they rightfully should. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side. Finally, Republicans are starting to call out Donald Trump. More than one of them, not only Chris Christie. What's happening? Could it be that they're growing a pair? Oh, no. They're kind of tepidly putting their toes to test what happens if we go up against Donald Trump, the guy who had all those papers, you know, that Donald Trump, if it were somebody else, would say, lock him up. Well, they're testing the waters, but at least they're trying. Check this out.
Trump's position on the national debt is identical to Joe Biden's.
There have been promises made about draining the swamp, building the wall, doing all these things. You know, none of that came to fruition.
He's a petulant child when someone disagrees with him.
He's also a fundamentally flawed person who engages in reckless conduct.
I don't need to read the indictment or believe its allegations are true, although I'm pretty confident they are.
Clearly, it was unauthorized, illegal, and dangerous.
I view them serious and disqualifying, actually, for commander-in-chief.
Anybody who doesn't want to look at the facts, they should be disqualified from running, not just Trump.
It's unbelievable that some of these Republicans finally seem to be developing a spine. Let's see if it lasts, or will they just revert to form? My bet is they're about to revert to form. Yep, I think they'll revert to form. Carl Cox wants another interview where we can discuss particular issues. I would love to interview you again, Carl Cox. I interviewed you once before, but I want to interview more of our, I want to interview more of our audience here. And by the way, an interview also is calling the number 281-823-7747. Why don't you call sometimes and talk in real time? And, believe it or not, that number can actually be accessed through a video call as well. I need to figure out how to set that part up. Anyhow, so yeah, I would love to have interviews with our regulars here for them to just come out and say the things that they want to say. We should have somebody wants to drop me an email and say, Berto, interview me. Let's do a Zoom, put it together. And because again, I want everybody to have their voice. If you listen to my 8 a.m. My 6 a.m. show, I get some regular callers, and every other day or so we'll get a couple of stragglers that just happen to pick up the I guess they're channel surfing and find it. So, as it turns out, no problem. They call in and we have a good time. So I would love to interview any one of you. Again, drop me a line and say, hey, I want my face out there with you, and we are going to be having a good conversation. Because, like I constantly say, this is your show. Now, I don't have any more material to talk about today, except for whatever else you might want to add right now, or if you may want to call in and finish off the show with me, 281-823-7747. Again, that number is 281-823-7747. I'm so lonely when you don't call me. I need you to call. I just invented that, Anyhow. So yeah, 281-823-7747. Who will be brave enough to call? Remember, I try to be a very, very nice guy. Everybody has a voice. Anyhow, folks, we are going to, if I don't get any more statements in the chat and I don't get a call in the next 40 seconds, I think I will be clocking out a bit early. Eric Hayes says, Egberto, primary versus population questions. Okay, go ahead. Let me hear the primary versus population question. What is the question? What is the question that you want answered, sir? Egberto, primary versus population question. What is the question? Or am I misinterpreting that? Go up. Oh, go up. Okay, let's see. The primary is where it will count, right? And if bad orange man goes for a deal or not, do you think his base in primary is as strong as in you have your investment program? Do I think, would I say you have where via your investment jargon? First of all, if doesn't matter what happens right now, based on how the numbers are right now, Donald Trump will win a Republican primary because Republican primaries are closed just like Democratic primaries are closed in most places. So he would win, and he would become the nominee if he wins the primary, which he likely would win. The next step is, can he win a general election? My answer again in the past would have been, not with all this stuff, he won't win. I have a different take after 2022. I mean, after 2020. For a Democrat to win in 2020, we had to so overperform. I'll be honest with you. If you had told me that Donald Trump would have gotten 70 million votes, I think that's what he got, somewhere in that vicinity. He got more votes the second time around than Hillary Clinton did. And we thought, many of us in this business thought, if Biden can just make 74 million, I don't think that's what it was. Let me look at, let's see, 2020, it'll be 2020 vote count. I want to see it. I want to have the numbers right. Vote count presidential. Let's see what it is. I'm going to look it up. All right. Let's see. I wish Ruddin was here because he picked it up. Oh, you're right, Eric. You're right. Eric, you're absolutely right. Biden got 81,000. Trump got 74,000. That is more than Hillary Clinton. Trump got more votes than Hillary Clinton got when she beat Trump in the popular vote. I mean, my question was, what were the 74 million people? And most of those people are not MAGA. What were they thinking to put such a flawed person in office? And as you listen to him now, there's nothing he's saying today that he hadn't said before. What goes through people's minds who are capable of voting for somebody like that? I don't know. So when people think that it's a foregone conclusion that he can't win, I don't share that certainty at all. There's something that happens in the American psyche. There is something that happens in the American psyche that supersedes rational thinking. And believe it or not, I think it has, thank you for that number, Hayes. I think it has subliminally to do with race. And that many believe the Democratic Party, in being as multicultural as it is, would take away something that is the birthright of that specific group of white people who vote for Donald Trump. And I say that with respect. I say that with no racial intent on my part. But I honestly think there is something intrinsic to how the Republicans promote racial identity that made a particular group of white people, a humongous group of white people, likely 70% of white people, to think that multicultural party winning is a clear and present danger to me. And in my humble opinion, that is the thinking process that white progressive, I know that I said white progressive. I'm not even going to say white progressive Democrats. I'm going to say white progressives. They have a big job to do. I mean, I try to do it, but again, there's just so much I can do or people like me can do. I think the heavy lift has to come from white progressives who can show that a multicultural system is not anathema to the type of democracy where everyone has equal access to success. And I think that is where we have to go. Dems don't have guts. I think you're right about that, Breach, but that is where we have to go. So anyway, that's my thought of the day. And for all my white people in this forum here, whether Democrat or Republican or whatever, you have to be that bridge. You have to be that bridge. Trump voters behave that it's other people who are causing the problems of the middle class. They blame racists other than whites and other faiths, non-Christians. And exactly, Carl, exactly. And that is what we have to break, right? We have to break that thing that pigmentation has much value. See, I like to make pigmentation valueless, but I can't until we've made it valueless. Anyhow, you will have less than 150 million this time. I don't know. We'll see, Eric. We'll see. But anyhow, folks, I got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.